This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I'm Karen Beach, and this is the Journey Step by Step Christian Podcast. And, we talk a lot about faith, but if there's one thing that I found personally, and I've talked to other people about this as well, that can really deter your growth as a Christian, your growth in your faith, your ability to trust the Lord, it is grief. The loss of a loved one can really shake you to your core. And I'm speaking from experience because I lost my mom when I was 15. And at that same time, on that same date, I sort of lost my religion too. And I always believed in God. I always, knew he was there. I knew he was a creator. I knew Jesus died on the cross for my sins. But a big part of me wondered, how could a loving God take a woman so vibrant, so full of life, and put her through a really bad health situation that ended in her leaving a 15-year-old daughter, and a husband, and putting us through all of the things that we had to go through during that time. I'm currently working on a book, my memoirs, currently called Adventures of a Quirky Girl Turned Wacky Woman. And most of it is fun and lighthearted, but there are a couple sections that are very difficult to write. And it's interesting that before this interview, I was talking to my dad about my mom's illness. She was diabetic. She lost her sight, loss of function of her kidneys. She was in and out of the hospital for probably the last 18 months of her life. And most of that time, I have major big chunks of memory that are just missing. But as a result of that, I realized that, or I came to the realization that I couldn't rely on God. I had to rely on myself, because if God could take my mom from me, what else could he do? And my answer is a bunch of stuff that wasn't good. And it took me a long time to come around to faith again. And I still work on trusting the Lord. I've come a lot further, definitely than where I was, but still, a lot of times I find myself trying to rely on myself, on my own efforts, because of what happened. Now, a friend of mine told me, but you've been surrounded by good people. You've been surrounded by love since then. So he didn't leave you high and dry. He's always taking care of you. And that is part of what helped me come back to my faith. But a lot of people don't, or a lot of people struggle after they've had this major loss in their life and they've suffered from grief. And so to that end, I have invited Katherine Barner, who is going to talk to us about grief and faith and where the two meet, and that they don't have to be at different sides of the spectrum. So, Katherine, welcome to the journey.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am looking forward to this conversation and just excited to be able to join you today on the show. Thank you so much.
So give me a little bit of background. Give the audience a little bit of a background about you and how you came to talk about such an important but often ignored intersection of grief and faith.
Right. Certainly. Certainly. I'd love to. So I like to tell people that it's really twofold. It's a merging of my professional world and my personal world. And so I am a psychotherapist by trade. And so I have worked in the mental health field for over 25 years now. And so obviously in the course of that, I've dealt with people who have experienced grief and loss on a number of different levels and from varying different trials and traumas and tragedies that have happened in their lives. But also on the personal side, I experienced the death of both of my parents. My father passed away in 2009 and my mother about 2.5 years later in 2011. And it was at that time, more so after the death of my mother, that I struggled mightily with everything that I knew at a head level professionally, everything that I had been teaching and counseling people to do for years and years and years. When it became very, very personal and up close to me, I struggled with moving through my grief and struggled with, how do I do this? And one of the things that I came to was, okay, God, if I know everything that I know at a head level and professionally, and if I know everything that I know spiritually, and I love you and I trust you and I believe you, if I'm struggling this much, how in the world is everybody else doing this? And so that led me to write my book, which is entitled God Help Me, I'm Grieving, Finding Healing After Loss, really just to give people permission to grieve in the way that they need to, but also to help people understand, and particularly those of us within the Christian community, that just what you said earlier, the fact that I do grieve, the fact that I have questions, the fact that I may struggle with my faith when this loss occurs, does not necessarily negate the fact that I do still love God. It means that I am in a season and a seat in my life where I'm hurting and I'm in pain, and I may not necessarily know how to reconcile those things. So that's the shortened version of kind of how I'll say fell into this, or God brought me to it, I guess I should say more importantly. And also being in the church and like so being in the Christian community and recognizing that we, for the most part, we don't always do a good job of helping one another grieve.
No.
Because we tend to, we mess this up quite a bit. Because we tend to use a lot of, church-ese and throw a lot of scripture at people during a time when they're just raw and hurting. And it's just not the time. And it doesn't mean that they don't know the scripture. It doesn't mean that, they don't believe. It means that they're just hurting. And so we can do more harm than good sometimes by not allowing people the time, the space, to grieve the way that they need to, and giving them permission to say, similar to what you said, I am angry with God, or God, I'm upset with you, or God, I am confused. I don't know why you did it this way. And just being honest about what those very real emotions are. So that was a roundabout answer to your question, but that's pretty much how I got there.
And it's true. Let's talk about people. I know people who try to say you just need to let go and let God, and your mother's in a better place. And my response was like, what is better than being with your 15-year-old daughter who needs you now? So that was my response. But what I've come to realize, dealing with different griefs at different times, that sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there.
Absolutely.
People have this belief that that there's going to be this right word to say, and all of a sudden everything is going to be, I see it now.
Absolutely.
No,
Absolutely.
sometimes what you need to do is just sit there. If you
are so right.
Eat chocolate and sit there, we'll eat chocolate and sit there. If you just want to sit there and maybe I put my arm around you, we sit there. But you
That's it.
Don't have to say anything.
Yeah. You are so on point, and I talk about this. I call it, and I got this from my pastor. Actually, talks about just the ministry of presence. And the example that I give to people is Job's friends. The first few days that he was struggling, at the beginning of his struggle, and that's what I say. You want people who are going to just be there. Because you're right. There's nothing that you can say to me, particularly, we'll use your reality as a 15-year-old child whose mother has just passed away. There is nothing that you can say to me in that moment that's going to make me jump up and go, oh, yeah, great, I get it. No, because the pain is real and raw. And so you're right. As believers in particular, and just as people in general who are trying to walk along someone who is alongside someone who's hurting, just being there. You mentioned it, just sitting with me in my hurt, and just sitting with me, in my silence or in my anger or with my questions, and just being there is the most important thing that we can do for one another, particularly in the beginning stages of the grief process, because there really isn't a thing that's going to make it better. But one of the things I talk about in my book is that a lot of times the reason that people will do that, and they will throw out those phrases, well, she's in a better place, or that your mother or your father or whomever wouldn't want you to cry that way, or God doesn't make any mistakes. They'll throw out all these things, but a lot of times they will say that, and it's not so much about you, it's more so because they don't know how to handle your grief.
Right.
And so if they can get you to stop crying, to stop being sad, to be better, it's not so much about you being better. It's you being better so they can be better, so they don't have to see your pain and your grief and your heartache. Because as a general rule, none of us want to see other people hurting, and we want to be able to do something to help them. But the reality is we can't. And that's a very, very difficult spot to be in. So the faster I can get you to stop crying, it's better for me. And then we can move on. So a lot of times that's where those comments come from. And what I share with people. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think too, it's okay to be mad at God.
Yeah.
And people, I've been told, I'm kind of ticked off. I mean, this was a big deal, and you kind of left me hanging, God.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And people are, oh, you can't be mad at God. And I'm like, but he's supposed to be my friend. And I'm supposed to be able to take everything to him. And right now, what I'm taking, as a friend, you have to be able to accept what your friend is saying to you.
Yeah.
I'm not defaming God. I'm not blaspheming God, but I'm like, I'm pretty ticked off.
Yeah. And I think I love that you said that, because the reality is this: whether you tell him or not, he knows anyway. So
this is true.
That's what I tell people. It's like, it's not like he, just because you don't say, God, I'm mad, that he doesn't know you're mad, because he's God and he knows everything. But he does want us to say that to him. And he's like, God's not going to, shrivel up and go, oh my goodness, she's mad at me, what do I do? No, it is because he is God that we are able to be that real and say, God, I am upset with you. And one of the things I say to people is, because even in saying that to him, on some level, you are still acknowledging that he is in control. And you are still acknowledging on some level, even though you may not recognize at that moment, that he is the only one that can handle the fact that you are upset with him. And so I tell people all the time, whatever the emotion is that you feel, it's not a right or a wrong. It's just an emotion. And God knows that anyway. That's how he created us. And we hear all the time people say, well, don't cry, you shouldn't cry. That makes absolutely no sense, because Jesus cried when Lazarus died. So if he cried, if he, Jesus, who is God, cried, then why shouldn't I cry when someone that I love?
And he's the comforter.
Exactly. And he is my comforter. So, but again, I think a lot of times in the Christian community, again, I think we try so hard and we go to the extreme of, because I'm a Christian, then that means that I shouldn't show any weakness, or I shouldn't cry, or I shouldn't have any struggles, or I should be strong all the time. When the reality is, no, the fact that I am a Christian, the fact that I do love God, by definition says that I'm going to have some struggles. And because I am still a human, the feelings that are related to that are going to be very real. And it's okay for me to express that. Now, how we express it, wanting to do that in appropriate ways, okay, we can have that conversation, but not the conversation of I shouldn't feel a certain way, or I shouldn't cry, or I shouldn't say that I'm angry with God. I think all of those things are very, very harmful to people when they are going through difficult seasons.
And I think it's important, too, at this point to say that we've been talking about grieving a loss through a death, but you could be grieving the loss of your marriage.
Absolutely.
You can be grieving the loss of a friendship you thought was going to last forever. I mean, I was in an interesting, sometimes I'm still there, in an interesting place where, at 50 years old, I don't have any kids. I'm probably never going to have my own kid, but all my life I've had a son. And I could think about Caleb. He has a name, and I could literally, for most of my life, and if I close my eyes now, I can hear him going, "Ma, what's for dinner?" But he's not here, and so I had to grieve the loss of a child that I was never going to have. So there's all sorts of grief that you can have. We associate grief with death necessarily because that's what a lot of grief is, but that's not the only grief that you can suffer from.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things that I talk about in my book, because in essence, grief is about loss. Grief is loss. And so it is my emotional response to loss. And so we can talk about loss, again, as it relates to death. And then that can be pulled into so many different buckets. We can be talking about the loss of a parent, the loss of a child. We can talk about the loss of a child that was never born. What you're saying, the loss of a child that I may not ever be able to have. And so there are all these different tentacles to that. At the same time, the loss of relationships. I talked to a lady a couple of years ago, and someone thought she was just absolutely off her rocker. But when her daughter went away to college, she couldn't get out of bed. And what I said to her was, you're grieving because you are grieving what was. There's this person who's been in your house for 18 years that you've taken care of, and you know every facet of their life. And now all of a sudden, they're going halfway across the country, and you have no idea what's going on. The communication isn't the same. There's a loss in that relationship. And so that's what's going on. Divorce. You mentioned, friendships that fall apart. We can talk about loss as relates to illness. My mother went through 7 months of deterioration before she finally passed away. Well, those 7 months, we had to grieve the mother that we knew, my brother and I, and this new mother that we had who became our child as we were now having to take care of her. That's a loss. She had to grieve, the loss of the life that she thought she was going to have. And all of a sudden now her children are having to take care of her. We talk about the loss of employment, whether you decided to quit the job, whether you retired from the job, or whether you showed up one day and they gave you a pink slip. all of those things. And even the other thing I talk about in the book is even, loss when we talk about natural disaster and the loss of possessions as a result of that. I talked to a young lady probably a year or so ago, and she had been affected by Hurricane Katrina. And her grandfather was a huge guitarist and played guitar and had taught her to play guitar. And he had bought her this amazing guitar. And in the midst of Hurricane Katrina, she lost her guitar. And she struggled mightily. And what I had to help her understand was it wasn't about the guitar so much. It was about the guitar, about what it represented to her and the relationship that she had with her grandfather. And so that was her grieving a loss. And so you're absolutely right when you say grief is not specific to death. I call that the grief myth. It is most definitely, it's about loss, and it's about any time we experience a significant loss, we can move through the process of grief, and it will look very, very different, obviously, depending on what the loss is, the level. If we're talking about a person, who it was, what the relationship was, there are all these different factors, but you're absolutely right. It is not specific to death.
It's not specific to death. And when my mom died, I went to like 2 counseling sessions, and the woman kept saying, "Oh, that's normal. That's normal." I'm like, then why is my father paying you this money? So I'm like, if everything is normal. But one thing she did tell me that stuck with me is that when you are dealing with a loss, and I think this can also be applied to a relationship or a friendship or a marriage as well as death, she said, don't canonize the person. Don't make them into a saint. Because she said, miss that person, but remember who they were. And don't all of a sudden my mom's playing with harps. Well, she was kind of moody. Sometimes she pushed me a little bit too hard. I get 96 on paper and she's like, "Great, what did you miss?" I'm like, okay.
Right.
But that's who she was as a woman. There are many, many, many great qualities, but I can't forget the other qualities as well that made her a whole person.
Exactly. I was just going to say that made her who she was. And you said it made her a whole person, because we all do have, our good days, our bad days. We have those attributes that we love. And then there are some that we're like, okay, I may have missed the mark on that one. And, but it helps us remember that we're all human. And that those people that we love and that are no longer, a part of our life for whatever reason, that they are human as well. I think that's a very good point. Very good point.
So,
and I think too.
Oh, go on.
No, go ahead.
Go on. No, you go on.
No, I was just going to say too. When we talk about, because we're coming up to Mother's Day, and Father's Day is going to roll around in June as well. And I think it's important for people to understand, when you experience these types of losses, again, if we're talking about the physical death of a mother, or if we're talking about just what you mentioned, not having children for whatever reason, this time of year can be really tough for people.
It can be.
And I think we have to, again, as friends, as family members, as loved ones, have to be mindful that everybody's journey is different, and that this season, while obviously we want to celebrate mothers and all that they do, and then again in June we want to celebrate fathers and all that they do, but recognize that for everyone, it's not always a really happy time of year. It can be tough, and make sure that we're sensitive to that and what that looks like. And I think sometimes even more so for those women who may be struggling with infertility. That's a loss. Women who may be struggling with, who may have had a miscarriage. That's a loss. And just being really, really sensitive and open and honest with people about that, and asking questions, how can I help you during this time? If we're having a Mother's Day brunch, are you okay coming? Do we need to give you a signal that says you only want to be there for 30 minutes and we're going to sneak out because it may be too much for you this year? and loving on each other enough to do that.
Which brings me to my next point, because you're like, how do you have all these points? Because I didn't even write this down, but I'm like, and here's another point. As soon as you start talking, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of this point. Grief comes in waves, and it never really, you learn to live with it. I'm a motherless daughter, like the book by Hope Adelman, and there are some Mother's Days and I'm fine. And then there are other Mother's Days. Some of them I'm grieving the loss of my mother. Some of them I'm grieving the loss of the mother I never was. I never got to be.
Yep.
But the last thing I need to hear, and now that I'm older, it doesn't upset me. It just ticks me off when people say, you know, when you're young, you're old. Now I'm like, well, wait a minute. You know, it's what happens when you get older. You can be kind of sassy in a way that you can't when you're a kid. But
I hear you.
I've told people, you know, I would rather not do Mother's Day this year. Your mother, you've been alive longer than you had your mother, so you should be over that by now. And I really don't say what I want to say because I am a Christian and because I am a nice person most of the time. I just give them a look that pretty much says everything. And it's like, if I were you, I would leave right now.
Yeah,
kind of look.
And those are exactly the kinds of comments that I'm talking about. We just said, like, it doesn't matter that I've been alive longer than I had my mother. The reality is I don't have my mother, and whatever that is for me, however that feels, whatever that looks like, how I move through that is okay. And again, like you said, people tend to say some things, but I go back to a lot of times it's because they don't know what to say, and they have not learned, kind of as we talked about earlier, they haven't learned the ministry of just presence and silence. And then certainly because they don't want to see you feel bad because of what that does to them. And so
I think too, just realize that everybody is not you. Everybody does things differently and they go through things differently. And just because it might not be a problem for you doesn't mean it's not going to be a problem for someone else.
Absolutely. Yeah. You touched on a few things there. You know, I talk specifically about that in the book. I refer to it as the 3 Ps. And one of those is that grief is personal. You know, every single one of us, we experience it differently. Even if, I'll use my brother and I, you know, our parents passed away. My mom, his mom, you know, my dad, his dad, we lived in the same house. But what my brother and I experienced on an individual level and how we each moved through our grief process is very different because we're completely different people. You know, he's male, I'm female. You know, I tend to cry more, you know, he doesn't. You know, he's a doer, I'm more of a feeler, all of those kinds of things. And so I think you're absolutely right. We have to, twofold, we have to know for ourselves that our grief is normal and that we have to know our personal grieving style. And then we also have to know that so that we don't impose our grief style onto others, because that's when the friction and the confusion and, you know, the hurt feelings and, you know, those things come up. And the other thing you mentioned, which is absolutely true, is that grief does definitely come in waves. It is not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 linear process and we put a nice neat bow on it, it's over and it's done. That's unfortunately not how it works. And I say to people all the time, the goal of grief is not to forget the person or the thing or whatever it is that you lost. That unless you have an accident and are hit in the head and develop amnesia, you're not going to forget completely. So that's not the goal. The goal is to be able to remember in a way that doesn't paralyze you with pain anymore. And so that you are now able to define what's now your new normal without this person or this thing in your life. And so you're absolutely right. There are, go ahead.
I think new normal is a way to describe it, because when you lose something so major to you, whether, it's a spouse, it's a parent, it's a death, it's a divorce, whatever it is, you have to adjust your life, and you enter into what is a new normal. Now that this person isn't here, what does my life look like? Who do I go? Where do I turn? How do I deal with this? Like you said, since this job isn't in my life, where, you had friendships, you had a routine that is now gone. So what are you going to do? And so the next question, because this is the Journey Christian podcast, step-by-step Christian podcast, how does God fit into all of this? How do we know? How do we fit God into all this?
Yeah. Well, I think it has to start with recognizing that He is still with us, even in the midst of it. I think a lot of times when we are going through difficult and dark seasons, we tend to think that God has somehow left. We tend to think that, okay, clearly He ain't paying attention to me, because if He was, he would not have let this happen the way He let it happen. Clearly if He had His eye on me, He would not have taken my mother the way He took her, or He would not have let these people fire me from my job, or He would not have allowed the storm to blow my entire house down. So clearly He's paying attention to somebody else. And so, but the reality is we have to start with believing wholeheartedly and trusting that even in the difficulties, He is still there. And then the other piece is kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, recognizing that the fact that I may have some negative emotions about this thing, and the fact that some of those negative emotions may be geared toward God, is okay. Because as long as I am communicating that to Him, and as long as I am still surrounding myself with people who can help me move through that in a healthy way, He's going to heal the hurt, the anger, the frustration, the fear, the doubt, whatever that emotion may be. So I think the biggest thing is resting in He has not left. He has not forgotten. He is not asleep. He has not turned His back. He hasn't done any of that. And then the other piece is recognizing and believing that He is in control and I am not. I say a lot of times that on a day-to-day basis, we will say that, we believe God's in control. We'll kind of say it and we throw it out there. But we operate in such a way that really says we're in control. As long as things are good, we really do operate as though we're in control of stuff. And so it's not until something happens that we are forced now to recognize that we are not in control. And I think a lot of times that's where the rub comes in, because we are now faced, looking right in the mirror with, okay, I'm really not running anything. This really is God's show. And that can be difficult because we want to be in control. We want to know the answer from A to B to C to D, all the way to Z. I need to know how it's going to play out. God, I need you to tell me what's going to happen next week, on Thursday at 3:30 and what's going to happen so I can plan for it and I can be good. You not giving me that heads up, that's a problem. So I do. I think it's those two things, knowing that He's there and trusting that He's in control.
And as you were talking, for some reason it came into my mind, it's when you're going through a grief period, you need to look for those God signs because they're always there.
Yeah.
but you need to
Absolutely.
look for his presence. When it's so easy to assume it's not there, you need to look
Absolutely.
for, conversations, people, things that happen that show you that he's still there, he's still present, and he's still in control.
Absolutely. One of the things that I say is if the only thing that you can hold on to, literally from one day to the next is the fact that you woke up. And I say that because none of us can wake ourselves up. Like when however God has set it up, our alarm clock, if we're dead in a sleep and the alarm clock goes off, like I don't know what happens for me to be able to hear the alarm clock to wake up. You see what I'm saying?
I even if you didn't hear the alarm clock, at some point, you're going to wake up.
Exactly. I'm going to wake up. And I have no clue how that happens every day. And so what I tell people is, if the only thing that you can hold on to is, I woke up and I didn't do that for myself, that's enough to say, okay, God is in control today. If that's the only thing you can hold on to, and just go from day to day until, again, you're able to get stronger and begin to heal to a point where you can see other things. And I can walk outside and I can see the sunshine and go, okay, God, that's you. I can hear a song on the radio at a point when I really feel like giving up and it's the exact right song and go, okay, God, I see you working. Or someone sends me a text message and says, hey, girl, you okay over there? When I'm really not okay. And I go, okay, God, I see you working. Those kinds of things. But right. It takes time for us to get there. And so a lot of times I will say to people, if all you got for today is, I woke up, I don't know, I know I didn't do it, so that says he did, so that says he's in control, go with that. And until you're able to move to a point where you can begin to trust him and see his hand more and more. Because you're right, it's there and he's there. Sometimes the pain is so great that we're just not able to see it. And I always tell people, and that's okay. That's okay.
It is. And we have to be okay not being okay. Because I think sometimes as Christians, we think we've got God, so we're always going to be okay. Everything's going to always be a certain way, especially new Christians. You come into the faith, hey, I'm a Christian, life is good. But there's going to be a time when it's not. And in those times, you have to be okay not being okay. The only perfect person isn't here. We're celebrating his resurrection soon, right? Because we're taping this before Easter. I always call every holiday Thanksgiving. I don't know why, but that's my thing. We're taping this right before Easter, but you want to be able to I forgot what I was going to say. I'm 50. Go ahead. Say what you were going to say.
I love it. That's okay. No, but I think that's a good point. You're right. And I call it just letting yourself off the hook, because you're absolutely right. We are still human. And as long as we are here on earth until Jesus decides to come back, we're going to have to endure some things. And to your point, a lot of times as new believers, and I think sometimes even as seasoned and mature believers, we can have a tendency to think that because of that, then my life should be roses and peaches and smooth sailing and nothing should ever happen. And I remind people that no, the fact that you are a Christian says that you are going to experience difficulty, because when I say that I'm a Christian, I'm saying that I am a follower of Christ. And he had to go through some stuff.
You have to take up that cross, and that's not always fun.
You got to take up the cross. No, it's never the cross we want. I could, prefer a different cross, Lord. It's like, let me tell you the one that I would rather take up, Lord. He's like, no, because the fact is that's the one you want, says that's not the one you need. Because
the
again,
one I have is on my necklace, and it's real small, and it's gold, and it's got a little diamond in it. I like that cross.
It's pretty. Yeah, It's pretty and shiny, and all. Yeah, it's not heavy at all. But the point is for us to be more like him. And the only way we can do that is when we go through some stuff, and he has to shave some stuff off of us and move some stuff and remove some stuff and show us who we really are, the parts that are not like him, going through the sanctification process. And you're right, it's not easy, but because we do know him, that's what allows us to be able to go through it. Because I always say, not having Christ and experiencing seasons of difficulty and disease and bereavement and all these types of things, I don't know how I would do it, because he is the hope that I have in the midst of it, as difficult as it is. He is the one thing that I can hold on to and say, okay, God, I don't know how we're going to get out of this, but what I do know is So I'm going to just hold on to you until you decide to do something different. And so I think that we have to also help people see that and understand that, while at the same time saying to them, it is okay that you're not okay right now. And knowing that that's only a season. You will not be okay forever.
Right.
So, yeah.
And you talked about Job, everything he went through, he got back in the end. And of course, when I read that, I wonder, like, you got more kids, but you didn't, he still had to be grieving the kids he lost,
Absolutely.
the things he lost, but he was able to come out on the other side. And
absolutely
did get more things, but he probably still always dealt with that little bit of grief from what he lost.
Absolutely. I believe that he did. I think there are a couple of things, in Job, we have to keep in mind that everything that happened, God allowed that to happen to Job. When we look at it and say, well, God, why did you shouldn't have, or because I am this person, I can't go through difficulty. God allowed that to happen to Job. And then the other thing I always tell people about Job is, we give Job's wife a hard time. And I say this a lot of times when I'm teaching on the fact that grief is personal. We talk about her. And she said some things. She did tell Job to curse God and die, but okay. Here's the reality, though. She had lost all of her children too.
Right.
So she was grieving as well. It just didn't look like Job's grief.
And she was there at the end, which tells me that God understood.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going. The fact that God restored Job's children, that he had more children in the end, and scripture never says that Job got another wife, says that Mrs. Job was still there and she worked through her grief and God was able to heal and restore her. So that I like to use it as a message to people to say, it may look different on you than it does somebody else, but that doesn't mean that God is mad at you. Because you may have a moment where you struggle and you may say some crazy stuff to him or to other people.
And the other thing about Job, yes, his friends were stupid, but they were still his friends. They came out and they said all the wrong things repeatedly, because it was a couple of times I was reading Job. I'm like, you really need to shut up now. And then he was like, and another thing. And I'm like, oh gosh, do you not realize how stupid you sound right now? So for the people grieving, there are people around you that mean well that might say the wrong thing. And for the people who are trying to be supportive, again, Shut up and just be there. Be present.
Just be there. Just be present. Yeah,
that whole chapter could have gone so much different. That whole book, if y'all would have just shut up, but you kept going.
Yeah, and I always tell people you want to be Job's friend the first 7-day version. Like the first week, they had it down. They were good. They just sat, didn't say a word to the brother. But then, after that week, I guess they got tired and they needed an explanation themselves. So you want to be
that whole week they were thinking about dumb stuff they could say. So after a week, they're like, "Well, it's not getting better, so let me give my 2 cents."
Yeah.
That's
exactly. So I think Job is an excellent example. When we talk about grief and loss, and I think that there's just so many things in that book that we can use to show us what to do and what not to do, and how to support and love on one another when we're going through difficult seasons. So.
And I think it also, to take us back to the beginning of what we talked about, it also shows different types of grief. Yes, he was grieving death, but he was grieving the loss of income, the loss of his business, the loss of his health. And it's a bunch of different types of grief that he experienced.
Absolutely. Like all of it wrapped into one. He literally lost everything. And I don't know any of us who can say I think we say we've lost everything, but if we look at it through the lens of Job, few of us have lost everything. And so again, I think it's a good example to us of what God can do. And what he's able to do. If he can restore Job, who did lose everything other than his life, then certainly he can restore us. Certainly he can restore and heal us in the midst of our grief as well. So.
And I think that's a good place to call it a day. But we have, I don't want to say I've had a great time talking about grief, but I kind of have. It's been a
great conversation. Yeah, it's been a really good conversation. Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. I love talking about this. I love talking about the book. Yeah, I love talking about this because I think
at the end of the day, we're all going to go through
so much.
We're all going to go through it, and I hate to say it. I don't want to be negative, but we are going to experience grief.
We are, and it's the reality of life. But I think being able to see what God can do in and through it is where I think we have to hang our hat and know that yes, it's going to be difficult, but ultimately God is going to do something to restore us and make it better. So
he will see us through. We just have to have that faith during that difficult time.
Absolutely. Wow, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me. I have enjoyed this conversation so much.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. This is a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to more great discussions. You're welcome to come back.
Well, thank you so much. We'll have to make that happen for sure.
All right, and so I'm going to end it. I can't find my Bible quote that I end this on. I can't find it. I've been looking for it, and I'm like, where'd it go? I don't know. Oh, I know why I can't find it. So say one more thing about grief, and then I will find it.
Okay, I'll say this. I will say this again, kind of what we said, knowing that I think when you experience grief, know that your loss is not the end of the world, even though it may feel that way. And know that, I think particularly since we are coming up on Resurrection Sunday, know that even in your loss, because Christ did die, but more importantly, because he did get up, that you can be restored after your loss. He is there, ready, willing, and able to heal you and to bring you into a place that, quite frankly, you never knew existed, because he is that kind of God, and he is that personal of a God to walk right alongside you.
Okay, so have I found it yet? That was a great way to end it. And yes, I have found it. So thank you, Katherine Barner. What's the name of your book again?
The title of the book is God Help Me, I'm Grieving, Finding Healing After Loss. And you can find it on my website at katherinebarner.org. It's on Amazon.com. It's in Barnes & Noble. It's at Redemption Press. Anywhere fine books are sold, you can ask for it, and it will be available.
And the link to Amazon will be in the show notes. So
awesome.
We are going to have a great time here. We've had a great time here. We're not going to have a great time grieving. No, that would not be right. But we have had a great discussion. And until next time, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.